But if you got your Bibles with you, turn to Job chapter 3. Now, for most of us, Job consists of the first 2 chapters and then the last 3 or 4 chapters. And all that middle part is just we fly over, or as they say, we celebrate the Passover. Because chapter 3 turns into poetry, and we, in our Western minds, modern minds, we don't handle poetry anywhere close to as well as we handle narrative. And so when you talk to someone about the Old Testament, they can tell you about the judges, and they can tell you about Joshua and Abraham and Isaac. They can tell you about the kings. But boy, once you get into Isaiah, they know a passage here or a passage there, but they don't really put the book together very well. And when you're covering a Song of Solomon, when you're covering Ecclesiastes, again, we kind of get the quote, but we don't look at the book as a whole because the way they did poetry is really different than what we do. The Hebrew language has many fewer letters than our English language does. The Hebrew language that they wrote the Bible in does not have vowels. And so sometimes you'll see a word and it can have many different meanings. And sometimes as you go through, it's just hard for us because since their poetry doesn't have meter, remember what did Shakespeare always do? Is it iambic pentameter? You remember that? Me neither. Okay. Shakespeare always had a certain meter that he wrote in, or you have the rhyming words that would go through. Hebrew poetry doesn't have anything close to that. Hebrew poetry works off saying the same phrase twice, and sometimes they say it twice to be different. Sometimes they say it twice the same in emphasis. Sometimes they kind of grow a certain direction. They use the poetry kind of to draw a picture, literally. They use poetry in alliteration, like Psalm 119. If you go through there, you'll see each section begins with a different letter in the Hebrew alphabet. But their poetry seems so different than ours that sometimes when we start in Job chapter 3, it gets hard for us very quickly to see what's going on and to stay motivated as we go through here. So it's a little bit of a different mind change, but it's rich. It is very, very rich. Like I said a few weeks ago, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, 1st and 2nd Kings is Bible Study 101. The freshman can do it. When you get to the book of Job, it is a 300 or 400 level class. You're looking at like juniors and seniors to really, you can get the lesson, but to really begin to delve out what is happening and what is being said, it's a little bit deeper than what we're used to. Now, if you study this, this chapter is called the intercosmic, It's the cosmic incantation. And if you Google it, it'll bring you to Job 3. We don't see it because we don't study Job very much. But what happens is this is where Job begins arguing with God. And so the cosmic, or the cosmos, which is the world but looking towards God, this is where Job begins his struggle against God and will begin throwing things out there. Now, what has just happened to Job in chapter 1 and 2? Everything's gone, right? Everything is gone. And it started from the least all the way to the greatest. Started with losing possessions. All right? If you have a lot of money in the stock market right now, you are somewhat depressed, right? All those people who are saying buy low, they are purchasing quite a bit, okay? It hurts to lose money. It hurts to lose possessions. It hurts to lose these things. It's worse to lose family. And imagine, don't imagine, I don't even want to wish that on somebody. But you know of people who have lost children. And you know that grief process that would happen when you lose your children. Job didn't lose just one child, he lost 7 children. And you can imagine the grief that is just bubbling over in Job as he's thinking about losing all these children. On top of that, his health is destroyed. As we finish chapter 2, we see where he is out on an ash heap, has a pottery that's broken, and he's breaking open sores to try to relieve the pressure. Now, why is he on an ash heap? Yes, that is a sign of mourning, and perhaps that's part of it. But he's looking for something to absorb the moisture out of his skin to try to relieve these boils that he has, because he is in absolute pain and misery. Yes, sir?
Side note,
Yeah.
just for funsies.
Just for funsies.
You said 7 children. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters.
Oh, 7 sons and 3 daughters. So he had 10 children. That's right. Okay, thank you. He had 10 children, 7 sons and 3 daughters. And so here he is in absolute physical agony. Here he is grieving the loss of all of his children. Here he is, he's just lost all of his social status, because back at this time, you were judged by your possessions. That showed how great your God was by your wealth. And so now all these things have happened, and now he is going through this process, and he starts to come to himself and begin to try to figure out in his mind, who am I and what is it I'm dealing with? And if you've been around somebody in grief, many times that's how it is. Your mind has to change. Your mind has to figure out who it is, and it has to deal with these things. Now, we love the Kubler-Ross, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, I think 1969 is when she came out with it. The 7 stages, is it 7? It's the stages of grief, and I think I have them on here, yeah. When somebody is diagnosed with a terminal illness, first thing is denial. I don't feel that bad. Doctor must be wrong. I'm going to make it through this. Okay, anger. Why did this happen to me? I'm angry at God. I'm angry at the doctor. Angry at bargaining. God, if you'll just get me through this, I promise I'll do this and this and this. Depression, where we're just torn apart. And then finally we move to acceptance. Now, we misuse the Kubler-Ross model because it was a measure of what somebody goes through when they have terminal illness. So it's not what happens when somebody loses a child or a spouse or a job. It's not something that happens when we lose, a kitty cat or whatever it is that's causing you to go through this grief. But it's a good starting place. And as we've studied it over the last 60 years, what you're going to notice many times, some people skip. They may never have denial, or they may never have anger. Sometimes people will just skip all of these. And sometimes people will do it in a wrong order or a different order. And so while the Kubler-Ross model isn't always the whole thing, it gives us a good starting place to think about how you deal with grief. But as we start chapter 3, imagine what Job is going through. Now, twice earlier, when he lost his children, lost everything, he refused to curse God. He said, we came into this world with nothing. We're going to go out with nothing. The name of the Lord is going to be praised, right? And then later in chapter 2, he says, I will not deny Christ, or I will not deny God. I will remain faithful. When something first happens, we have a reaction. As we think about it for a little bit, that reaction changes somewhat. And here you see Job trying to make sense of what's happened to him, trying to make sense of why God would do these things. That's a pretty van, isn't it? It's the catering van. It's very pretty. All right, class is over. No, not yet. And so it's this idea of dealing with grief which is going on here. Now, I talked about a few weeks ago, we're going to study Job, but we're going to study it through a different lens. And it's a lens that has helped me to understand the book. I'm a person who likes to be in control, okay? If we had a lot of elders in here, they'd probably say amen, because I'm always like, I want to do this or that. And they're like, okay, you just, no. All right. But we want to be in control. And so in order to be in control, we try to control the circumstances, don't we? All right? My wife, Rhonda, used to always say, you are a helicopter parent. Because I would know every day, okay, what are my kids doing, where are they going, and why? And I would check on them, and half the time they would more or less respond, I'm 25, leave me alone. And I'm like, no, you're still 7. I know. I feel like you're still 7. And so I would try to control everything that goes on. You don't still do that, do you, Hesta? Yours are 70 and you're still working on it. All right. Okay. That's why Doug behaves, right? Philip and Billy. We control. You love your kids. You want to control them, okay? We, in our body, we've learned to have a better body. You control your body. So you watch what you eat. You exercise properly. You get sleep. Not last night, but usually. You get enough sleep, right? We want to control our government. And so because of that, we vote. Because of that, we will work on donating perhaps or whatever it may be. We just need to control our world around us. Are you in control? The older you get, the more you realize you're not the person who's in control. You're not the person who, there is no way that you can control the way that you want to. And so here's Job's experience going on right here. Job before had made a deal with God, and it's a deal that you even read about it in the Bible. God blesses those who are faithful. God curses those or punishes those who are unfaithful. And so Job had played by the rules, and not only had he been faithful to God, he was sacrificing for his children as a patriarch, leading everybody the correct way. Job had treated everybody in a proper way. Job had done everything, absolutely everything right, to where he was the first name on God's mind when God was talking to Satan. And so in Job's mind, he needs to die in his sleep at the age of 100 million years old. He needs to not have a problem in the world because he's given God what God deserves and he is in control. What's happening in chapter 3, Job is going through a jolt. He's just realized, I am not in control. I can make no sense of why God would allow this to happen to me. I cannot understand in any way why this is going on. And he studies himself and he's looking at himself. And as we go from here in chapter 3 all the way through the mid-40s, we're going to see everybody trying to give you a reason why this happened. And some of it's going to be Job, much of it's going to be his friends, but everybody wants to be in control here because they've never seen what's happening in heaven. They did not see the argument between Satan and God. And so they're trying to make sense of it because we just feel the need to be in control. And that's really what the book of Job's about. Now, theologians call it God's sovereignty, and they say that's what it's about. But it's about being in control. Who can be in charge? What you got, Mike? Yeah. Yes.
Satan took everything away from Job.
Right.
And therefore, maybe in a way, we can fast forward to today, because today, and you mentioned in one of your sermons 2 or 3 weeks ago, why do bad things happen to God's people? Well, my question to that is it Satan even today? And I think so, yeah.
Yeah. You always have to remember it's Satan who did this. Yeah.
A lot of times we say, why did God do this, or why did God allow this, something like that. But I think it would help us today if we just kept in mind that Satan is what causes a lot of the issues.
Yeah. It's Satan that hurts, not God. Yeah, that's true. That's true. And we always have to remember what happened in the first 2 chapters as they're trying to figure out the things that are going on through here. And that's an important thing for us to see. All right, so let's start going through this passage. Let me grab my Bible. Job 3 divides into 3 sections. 1, 2, and 3. And he is trying to regain control by telling God what to do. And he's calling down the cosmic incantation, in other words, a sorcery spell, for those who are into the sorcery stuff, hopefully not too much. He is calling down a spell from God or from anybody he can convince that knows God to more or less end all these things which happened. And so that's a big part of what's going on. So let's look at the first 10 verses. Yeah, I got enough time. All right. Job opens his mouth, verse 1, curses the day of his birth. Job spoke and said, may the day perish in which I was born, the night in which it was said, my male child is conceived. May that day be darkness. May God above not seek it, nor the light shine upon it. May darkness and the shadow of death claim it. May a cloud settle on it, and may the blackness of the day terrify it. As for the night, may darkness seize it. May it not rejoice among the days of the year. May it not come into the number of the months. Oh, that that night might be barren. May no joyful shout come into it. May those curse it who curse the day, those who are ready to arouse Leviathan. All right, we're going to spend some time in verse 8. Leviathan's a cool dude. Can preachers say that? Leviathan is interesting. We'll put it that way. May the stars of the morning be dark. May it look for light, but have none, and see the dawning of the day, because it did not shut up the doors of my mother's womb, nor hide the sorrow from my eyes. All right, so his first beg towards God is, God, erase my existence. People are judged by their goodness, by their evil, especially in this day. And Job is in misery because of his death. Job is in misery because of his health. Job is in misery because of what everybody thinks about him. And he says, God, not just kill me, that'll come later. God, erase. Take away my birthday, burn my birth certificate, make it where nobody even remembers or knows about me. Don't let other people grieve. Just make me a forgotten person. Now, verse 8, Leviathan. We spend a lot of time with Leviathan later in the book. He's also found in the book of Psalms. And we spend a lot of time trying to be scientific and look at Leviathan. Is he a crocodile? Is he a dinosaur? He's a sea monster of some sort. And so if you're with Apologetics Press or you're with some of these guys who like to look at dinosaurs or whatever, they focus on Leviathan and Behemoth. If you put that aside and go back to Bible thought and the people who wrote about the time that the Bible was written, Leviathan is a mythological creature. It may have had its basis in the crocodile, because a crocodile would just show up at certain times and grab something and then disappear. It may have been a sea creature of some sort that would just appear and swallow a boat, and with all of its sailors. But Leviathan to Job, when he's thinking about it, he's not saying, hey, I wish a crocodile would show up and just start chewing on. That's not what he's saying. Leviathan was this mythological creature in people's minds who would just arise and take something out of nowhere. You'd never see it coming. And so for them, this idea, a solar eclipse, a lunar eclipse, the idea in the mythological mind of the people in the Near East at the time was Leviathan had stretched up and had stolen the sun, and then eventually God would make it, I'm sorry. It reminded me of a story, but I don't know if I need to share it. But, the Leviathan would have to spit it back out. Here's the story. I was at my sister's house, and my sister loved animals, a lot of animals. And they had some kittens, which were walking across the back porch, and one of her dogs ran across and just leaned over and gulped up one of the kittens. And one of the kids grabbed the dog and did the Heimlich, and that kitten just went, psh, and then just followed the mother again. Like this is a common thing. And I was thinking, well, I won't tell you what I was thinking, but I was just like, how did I see that? Okay. So it was weird as saying. They knew exactly where to push on that dog. It was like a push button. Boop. And then out popped that kitten. It stuck in my mind forever. Poor me. All right. Well, that's kind of how Leviathan would do an eclipse. He would swallow the sun, and God would say, no, psh, and then it would come back out after a few minutes, or the moon or whatever. So back to more serious stuff. Job is saying, God, the condition of my life right now, I wish I'd never been born. I wish no one ever knew me. I wish I did not exist. My life is horrible. My life is miserable. I do not need to be on this earth any longer. Now, we look at that and we say, that's awfully extreme, Job, until we realize he's lost a child. Not one child, but 10 children. We say, Job, that's awfully extreme, until we see medically, health-wise, what he's dealing with. And so chapter 3 begins to show us just how bad it is for him. Yes, sir?
Sometimes in our grief, too, he may have known there were 3 friends going to come fix everything,
Yep.
and he was regretting it.
That's right. He's got his 3 friends. They've been silent for 7 days, but he knows what's coming because he's probably had similar conversations with these men before. Yeah. And so even his friends are not going to be a blessing soon. Even his friends are not going to be a blessing. So, he's got a tough time coming. All right. Now, we've cursed the day of our birth. Now look over here. And who do you get to curse the day of your birth? Remember Balaam in the book of Numbers? You'd have these random prophets that would wander around, and you pay them a certain amount of money, and they would curse people, they would curse dates, they would curse different things, and God would work through them to destroy them. So he is asking for a sorcerer to come by like Balaam, who can just curse that day, cause Leviathan to pull that day off a calendar, and for him to never exist and never be anywhere around. All right, now let's look at verses 11 through 19. Why did I not die at birth? Why did I not perish when I came from the womb? Why did the knees of my mother receive me, or the breast that I should nurse? For now I would have lain still and been quiet. I would have been asleep, and I would have been at rest. With kings and counselors of the earth who built ruins for themselves, or with princes who had gold, who filled their houses with silver, why was I not hidden like a stillborn child, like infants who never saw the light? Where the wicked cease from troubling, and the weary are at rest. There the prisoners rest together. They do not hear the voice of the oppressor. The small and the great are there, and the servant is free from his master. All right. He says, why could I not have been stillborn? Why, when I was born, did the people who were receiving me give me to my mother to be fed? Why did they allow me to live? Why could I have not been stillborn and just die? Now, people will look at this passage pretty deeply, and we don't have the time to do that today necessarily, but they'll look at it, and as they're studying it, it's interesting to see Job's view of the afterlife. He's not thinking heaven, hell. He's just seeing death is a release. I had an old preacher one time talking about churches and how all churches have problems in some way or the other, and he'd always say the only place without any problems is the cemetery. You go to the cemetery, no problems there. Maybe the grass needs to be mowed, maybe the weed eating or whatever needs that. But really, those people in the cemetery, their eternity is sealed. They are not stressed, right? And Job, that's his view of death. He says, listen, the dead have the kings who have accomplished great things. They have princes who everybody loves. They have the slave who has the oppressor. And the oppressor is always whipping the slave. When the slave dies, his troubles are done. When the criminal ends up dying, his problems are done. And he says, listen, God, if you would just let me die, all these problems would be gone. My grief would disappear. My troubles would be finished. If you would just let me die, then I would be in good shape. And he says, I wish I died on the day of my birth, and every day that I've lived, it would have been better if you would have taken me at that point. And now here he is, probably an older man, and he says, God, I just wish I had died. Now, what's interesting when we look here, is Job ever talk about suicide?
No, he's
Absolutely not. Yeah.
so he does things nobly.
Yeah. Yeah, Job never talks about suicide. Now, would you be suicidal if you were in such troublesome health? Would you be suicidal if you had lost your whole family? Would you be suicidal if everybody thought of you differently suddenly for whatever reason there might be? A lot of us may, but Job recognized the nobility of life. He recognized that we are absolutely made in the image of God. And so it was God's decision and not his when we're talking about the end of life. And that's true even today for each one of us. All right.